This is the summary of the waste management paper we had to summarize. The title is Landfills and Disasters, a Geospatial Analysis of Environmental Injustice Across the Southern United States. This is a citation for it, and I highly recommend that you read it because it's a much more detailed look at the information. We'll start by looking at the research question of the paper, which can be summarized by the two hypotheses they state. The first one is dense concentrations of landfills tend to be located in areas with relatively high non-white and female household families. So pretty much any area with lower income that has higher minority groups and female-led households will have larger amounts of landfills, like higher concentrations of them. And the second hypothesis is dense concentrations of landfills tend to be located in counties that have experienced a relatively high number of natural disasters. What they're saying with this is that areas with natural disasters have higher landfills. They say this because disasters create a lot of waste, and for convenience, a lot of landfills are generated around these areas so that all the waste can be dealt with. So their argument is that minority groups are more likely to live in areas with higher rates of ecological disasters, and that these ecological disasters in turn lead to minorities living in areas with higher concentrations of landfills. This is studied fairly well already, but they're really trying to connect the fact that ecological disasters are leading to these landfills. And the other part of the argument is that existing unequal social structures lead to higher landfill concentrations within primarily minority, single-mother household areas. Due to these areas' vulnerability to ecological disaster and the economic impact these disasters and the landfills generate is affecting the population. So the population of the study, it's supposed to represent the entire U.S., but they do not study the entire U.S. They pick an area that is more susceptible to ecological disaster and more susceptible to things like lower environmental laws, lower public health laws, with historical inequality in these areas. All this is made to sort of bump up the concentration of the effects they're studying to make it more prevalent, so they have more data to have a larger support for their hypotheses. And the specific area studied in the paper is the Black Belt South. It's more specifically the states of Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee. And like I previously said, this is a fairly well-studied topic. This paper is just adding specific details. So ecological disasters. Areas in majority-minority populations are more likely to experience disasters, and ecological disasters devalue property, cause health hazards, and lead to increased landfill production, as well as unsafe management of these landfills, like, for example, wastes that are toxic being sent to municipal landfills, causing health problems around them. These are all well-studied things from papers that are mentioned in the paper we're talking about. Another thing that's also studied is that inequality with landfills. So on top of the ecological disasters and the effects they cause, individually, areas in majority-minority populations are also more likely just to experience landfills, isolated from the fact that they're also more likely to experience ecological disasters. Landfills, just like ecological disasters, create health hazards and property devaluation. That effect kind of creates a positive feedback loop of the poverty in the area. Landfills become improperly managed during disasters, and as a result continue the inequality in the disparities of ecological disasters as well as landfills. So they're both connected to the landfills and ecological disasters, but they are also both individually causing these effects. The study of the individual effects and the link between them have both been studied. This paper is just showing it in a new light because it's, for one, looking at all landfills. Previous studies really only affect on specific types of landfills, but this study is aiming to encompass everything and show that all landfills are causing this disparity in the inequality of experiencing pollution. And this study also looks at geospatial patterns. They argue that this is something that isn't used enough in the literature and something they really want to add. They're trying to add conceptual knowledge on the geospatial pattern of these disparities and the social and economic factors that cause them. So the methods section of the paper talks about how they collect their data. They use environmental departments of each state to look at the landfill data and the Federal Emergency Management Agency to look at all the natural disaster data. They have a dependent variable of landfills as a percentage of the cumulative regional total. So basically, the amount of landfills in this area divided by all the landfills in the greater area times 100 to make it a percent. And their independent variables are the amount of disasters per county and the demographics, such as like race. And for their statistics, they use a spatial regression model. This allows the geospatial similarities to be accounted for. Regressions allow you to see how similar data are, and this is what allowed them to see if one county was similar to another county because they were close together or not. So the findings of the paper were that areas with higher minority areas are generally correlated with both natural disaster and landfill count. This pattern also shows up for female head of household areas. So pretty much the groups, the demographics they were looking at supported their hypotheses in general. Of course, there's outliers. So their hypothesis was very supported. They also found that areas with higher natural disasters generally correlated with higher landfill percentage. So when you take out the variable of the demographics, they also just found that any area with a lot of ecological disasters leads to a lot of landfills. And their geospatial analysis generally revealed that areas adjacent to areas with similar characteristics were similar, meaning that if one area was poor and had a lot of landfills in it, the areas around it were far more likely to also be poor and have a lot of landfills around them. Same with same with ecological disasters. So the knowledge that this paper added to the greater sociological knowledge base is that for one, they support the idea that spatial inequality has an effect and plays a role. It's at least visual. You can definitely see the effect. Whether or not that means anything, they didn't really go into that. They just showed that the spatial correlations are there. Also that all landfill types correlate with the tested variables, as all the previous literature only looked at a few landfill types. This one looked at all of them. So the correlations are expanded to the entire problem of landfills, not just the specific ones. Also that natural disasters and the improper landfill use that follows them affect the health and well-being of these around them. They did not prove or really look at the health effects of landfills, but with prior literature, they brought up that that's something that happens. And what they did support and show in this paper was that natural disasters lead to more landfills, and that through previous papers, again, landfills are improperly managed from these natural disasters. So it can then be concluded, although not fully supported scientifically, that these areas have improperly managed landfills that hurt everybody. And then also how intersectional identities are important to research with environmental inequality. This is talking about how not only the demographic of minorities, but also the female head of household areas experience similar disparities. That's important to look at. And that's the paper. Thank you for listening.